Oh, hello. So I had this dream the other night, and it took place in this open field, and it seemed like it was at night, and maybe a moon or something, because the students that I could see in front of me, their faces seemed kind of illuminated, and then behind them were just rows and rows of students whose faces were shadowed, and I call this dream Clank because it there was just this loud, like every student had like a wooden spoon and a metal, one of those like hydro flask containers that sometimes y'all bring to class and it's obnoxious, but just this loud clanking, and so just this keeps echoing, and I looked over, and there was kind of a group of students that I recognized, but again, it's more like an archetype. And in front of them, they had this old metal bucket, this empty bucket, and it looked like it had been painted white with like black diamond crisscrosses all the way around it, like a netting almost. And the sound of the clanking got real hushed. And as it got hushed, I saw out of the corner of my eye those students, and one student just stood up and said, "Blast them with facts, Newson." Okay. So I woke up and here I am. And with some help of an eye student, I'll call you an eye advisor. Thanks for the help. I appreciate it. And this is brought to you by a smile and a baseball bat. Because it's going to hurt a bit, a bit. I call this my five gets. And I I'm passionate about education. I know a lot of people want to change education. And so this is just kind of my own foundation. This is the beginning. And so the five gets, the first one is get business management systems out of education, conflict of interest. And I think there's some business management systems that are involved in education, obviously for profits, but I'm thinking this is pretty unethical. The first one is the College Board, which is considered a monopoly by definition. It is solely dependent on education. This not-for-profit earned $1.2 billion in 2020. And in my research, they have used those funds to make sure that they hire lobbyists to pass legislation, to make sure that, that there's legal requirement to take some of the College Board tests. So I think that's up for some discussion. Coke and Pepsi and fast food. Now, Coke and Pepsi had a real interesting campaign where people were arguing about whether you're a Coke person or a Pepsi person. While they were doing that, they were dividing up school districts into what are called pouring rights. And what those pouring rights did was it gave exclusivity to public schools, entire counties, to either Coke or Pepsi. So they just kind of combined forces. And so, for example, Jefferson County Public School, Pepsi has exclusive rights. You cannot sell Pepsi products on Jefferson County public grounds. And I think Coke is the same with Denver. So they have an obligation. I mean, again, it's a monopoly by all accounts, at least an oligopoly. And then fast food, what they do is they have what's called economic geographic zoning laws. And so they create an environment, especially around high schools, where you have a lot of fast food places. And so there's a lot of competition to make sure that those fast food places are attached to schools. Textbook cartels, shall we say, have dominated education for over 100 years. And the main three are Pearson, Scholastic, and McGraw-Hill. And they have, according to Market Access, they have been gouge coding or whatever. But I guess what's more concerning to me is that you have this oligopoly coming in. What are economic textbooks? I'm not just concerned about textbook companies dominating economically, but where do they get the information? Who's going to start fighting over the content? Another business management system or group of them are called the Big Four, and those are the big four empires, Google, Amazon, Apple, and then depending on what you look up, either Meta or Microsoft, sometimes they change names. They put $3.1 billion into education in 2005, and that increased by 30% during the pandemic because they just knew that they were going to make a lot of money off of kids again. Apple's been a big supporter of STEM, so that, what was their quote? So that they can have, all kids should be able to have access and learn code, but for what reason is my question, I guess. A quote that I found, it said, a most disruptive year to schools proved lucrative for the education industry, particularly for those raising private capital. And besides like the big five that are monopolizing public education, there's also miscellaneous businesses that have found quite the profit. The National Retail Federation forecasted in 2021 that between 10 and 13%, that totaled $4.44 trillion that is made with back-to-school sales. One of the quotes was, "That's good news to capitalize on BTS, or back-to-school rite of passage shopping," from Market Source. Johnson & Johnson, sorry, I got a little ahead of myself. Jostens, the company that sells gowns, caps and gowns, rings. They've been a monopoly in education. They've got many lawsuits because of their yearbook. Interesting sales and how they've kind of price gouged according to some resources. Fundraising, like around here it was called the ABC fundraisers. And I'm not insinuating that there's anything illegal or anything about fundraising, but it's just always kind of irked me that kids would go door to door to sell wrapping paper to fund their own education. It just seems kind of absurd. Life Touch, I think, is owned by Shutterfly now. They've had a monopoly on school pictures since 1936. Five more just under the one get, which are apps that are targeting kids, social networks, media images, tobacco, vaping, alcohol, same playbook that they've used. And then Big Pharma have had huge profits off of essentially kids being sick. And I feel like public education is keeping kids sick and then profiting off of the sickness itself, right? ADD medication, ADHD medication, those were all diagnoses that were created around public education in the first place, right? And then they turn on a profit. And I like talking about BMs, business management systems, in that regard, because I'm not blaming a specific person. I think we're done with that. I think that if anything, we're all kind of responsible for this because we're all kind of literally buying into it. And what I'm suggesting is just go ahead and have your businesses just outside of education, because I think there's a huge conflict of interest here. The number 2 of the 3 gets, is time. Sorry. And I didn't quite know how to word this, but I'll call it get time zoned, which is to be aware of the time that business management systems have kind of infiltrated our lives. In 1896, Robert Owens proposed it was a very catchy slogan: work 8 hours, play 8 hours, sleep 8 hours. And so that became very catchy, and it became the reason why we have an 8-hour workday. Well, the 8-hour workday was a revolution in and of itself, because it was down from a 10 to 14-hour workday. Now, of course, when they did have a revolution or decide to fight for a minimum of an 8-hour workday for basic health care and human rights, business management systems even then are going to come in and infiltrate. They're just going to try to dominate your time. And I guess my argument is, even though I'm talking about labor in the future, that 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 has to start in public education, right? You condition kids to work at least 8 hours because business management systems are going to come in and occupy that time. And then what about sleep? I think sleep, getting 8 hours of sleep a night is a myth because we have circadian rhythms. Some people need a little bit more, some people need a little bit less. And then during times of year, sometime a little bit more, sometime a little bit less. But I think my point is business management systems make sure that our sleep is on their time so that we constantly are working for them, right? And I believe that school especially encroaches on our sleep habits. It doesn't just take place 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. It takes over evenings with homework and weekends and jobs and things on top of that. So I wondered if we treated our time as guarded as we treated our money. You know, it's like if somebody took money right out of your wallet, you might get pretty upset. But yet we sit through some bogus meetings for an hour. That's a considerable amount of money, but yet we just kind of complain about it, which takes up even more time. Anyway, I think that your time is being monopolized by monopolies. Number 3 in the 5 gets is genuine knowledge. Now, I alluded before to the fact that, you know, when you get these textbooks, you know, who's giving you this information? And I've got a great quote for you. I'm just going to take off my glasses for a moment here. Okay. The state must make good through intellectual power what it has lost in physical strength. In a word, complete revolution of the former system of education is what I propose as the only means of preserving the nation in existence. For no man, no God, no event in the range of possibility can otherwise help us. And that quote was in 1894. I'm sorry, that was actually a quote prior to that. That was from Frederick Wilhelm III of Prussia. And he lost the Battle of Jena in the Napoleonic Wars, and decided that education needed to be the new German way because it had just become a country unified with sorry, little history geek. But anyway, the United States education system based our system on Prussian system because of this law. So that quote is quite dated, but in the United States, there was a curriculum that they decided to develop again from Frederick Wilhelm III. And this curriculum that started in the United States was developed by 10 people in 1894. I'll include a chart on my webpage because it's really fascinating. The chart from this committee of 10. And in 1894, I think you can imagine what those 10 represented, what they looked like. Anyway, this committee of 10's chart is almost identical to the qualifications that you have to have that are mandated that you have to have, like math and science, which we'll get to right here.